During the planning stage, I really didn't want to just plagiarize the original painting, so I thought, why not just draw everything from scratch while heavily referencing the swing? Now, I've done this sort of thing before for portrait commissions, and ultimately, it's a bit of a waste of time if at the end of the day you're planning on having something that's just very similar to what it is that you're referencing. So, I decided instead to alter the swing on Photoshop, give it more of a watercolor look, and use that as the base for my drawing. It might seem like cheating, and sometimes it definitely feels that way, but you're gonna see soon how much ended up changing between this piece and the original version, especially because of how many layers I had to make, so this just ended up saving me a lot of time. While I used the original altered painting as a base, I still had to go over basically every element in the scene, either to clean up, remove objects from the front, define shapes, or just to extend that element past what we can see, since I was planning on adding some depth that would involve those elements changing size. You'll see what I mean. Even though this is a 2D painting, the more time I spent with it, the more I realized how well it portrays depth. There are a lot of ambiguous spaces, shapes, distance in the lighting, and honestly, even though the whole point of this animation was to make this painting come to life, I was risking making it feel smaller and deader by assigning every piece of it a specific location. So, as I moved forward, I really had to keep in mind what made this original painting so effective. What I definitely had to do from scratch were the statues. I originally wanted them to be like those old, ambiguous statues that you can find in some of the games, but because the figures in the paintings are little cherubs, I went for a more fairy type inspiration. I landed on Togetic, Jigglypuff, and Floette, which actually made me change the main focus of the scene. Now, originally I was gonna do it with Lilligant, but because this was looking more like a fairy type garden, I decided to go with Florges. If you're enjoying this video, please remember to like and subscribe. It was actually really fun translating the poses and lighting of these statues into the new Pokemon ones. I also decided to just redesign this part of the tree a little bit more. I wanted it to be a little bit windier and then also add a little bit more moss, and it's still very similar to the original, so I don't know if it was necessarily worth it, but hey, I wanted to, add my part to the painting, so this whole front area actually had to be changed a little bit because in the original painting there's like a man pushing the woman on the swing. There's apparently a little white dog that's, like behind the ledge. There's like baskets on the floor and like a man on the bush. So, I had to just get rid of all that because they didn't belong. And in fact, the painting itself is a little bit shorter than the aspect ratio that I used for this animation. So regardless, I was gonna have to draw a little bit more. But here I decided to go with a few more flowers on the ground and make the forest just feel a lot greener and make it feel a little bit more magical, like a garden. Right now I'm animating on Procreate, which I do not recommend. It's just I'm having licensing problems with TV Paint. I refuse to work on Procreate Dreams, but of course using Procreate means that I don't have access to multiple animation layers, and this just makes everything so much slower, but hopefully I can get it figured out in the future. If not, I'll just get a new license because it takes way too long. At least longer than it should. The benefit is that I can quickly make some coloring choices, and because I want my frames to look painted, I sort of have to use Procreate at some point anyway. Speaking of animations, to make this scene come to life, I decided to make my life harder and do some more work. Now, I thought, why not add some Hoppip? It would be easy all the way there in the background. It sort of helps the scene feel a little bit larger and show that there are some Pokemon around. It might be like a bright and beautiful day, like it's spring, something like that. It feels more lived in. I add some Cutifly to this fairy garden here in the front. They're pollinating some flowers until Florges swoops in and scares them off. Now, I imported Florges' animation into After Effects and I timed it so that she would swing 3 times, but every time was identical, so I actually went back and I decided to make a few changes to her animation for each swing. So sometimes her leg is like a tiny bit different, her eyes are closed, and for the last swing, she gives like a little kiss goodbye. So this just helps make it seem like she's not doing the exact same thing over and over again and make the scene feel a little bit more realistic. Yeah, I used a lot of layers in this project. Each layer needs to be scaled specific to its distance from the camera. Farther objects will move or change a lot less, that is, their scaling value will change less, whereas closer objects will change more or have a bigger change in value. So if something's far away, it might go from 100% its size to 102% its size, whereas something that's a lot closer might go from 100% its size to like 140% its size, just because it's moving a lot faster since it is closer to the camera. So you want to take that into account just because it changes with each scene and it sort of helps build the illusion. After the illusion is made, I move on to some effects. The first is the light beam shining through the scene. Now, this effect seriously slowed down my rendering time, but it's so important to the scene that I just had to have it. Even with the light beam, the scene still felt a little bit empty. I did get rid of the man pushing the woman and the little dog and, well, the second man, so I sort of had to compensate a little bit. I tried out a few ways of making leaves fall naturally from the trees, and I used effects like Cylinder and Particle World, and while Cylinder actually ended up being a really cool effect that I would use later, Particle World just wasn't working out for me, and this basically meant that I had to manipulate the leaves' paths manually, which wasn't too much trouble. But the leaf still looked a little bit out of place to me, and I figured out it was because they didn't have outlines like the other leaves in the scene, so I played around with some effects and I actually managed to get a look that I really liked. Finally, I used some puppet animation and I put in the swing. Now, this process actually took me a very long time. It took me a few tries before I actually knew what I was doing, and even then I still had to rotoscope a lot of it because it sort of overlapped with Florges' animation, so I don't have any footage of it. I was very focused during that time, and I'm actually kind of glad that I don't have to look at it again, but you might be able to tell it sort of took a lot of work, but I'm also very happy with how it looked, and this was definitely the right call. And so the animation is done. Now, I still want to clean it up a little bit. I do this cool effect where you duplicate the animation layer and then you blend it in with the original layer through the lighter color mode after blurring it. So this sort of gives it like this dreamlike feel, and it's just kind of cool for this particular forest because I want it to seem like a, like a fairy forest. It's like we're in a dream, and yeah, I think it works here. I also add a little bit more contrast to really show off the light beam, and I actually also added this painting texture to make the scene even more like a painting, and it sort of like doesn't move as much, so if you have a really high quality version of this video you can see it a little bit better. But then I also add some sound effects, and I really make sure that those align to the actions that are happening in the scene, and yeah, that's basically it. Thank you guys for making it to the end of the video. I hope you liked it. Please leave a like and subscribe, and if you want to see more content like this, please consider joining my Patreon. As you just saw, these videos take a lot of work and it would help me continue to make content, which I definitely want to do. You'll also get access to other perks and the community Discord where you can share art and vote on the next Pokemon. So, thanks!